Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Billi FitzSimons.
I'm Zara Seidler.
On Monday, a man threw a bomb into a crowd at an Invasion Day rally in Perth, Western Australia. Police said the bomb, which failed to detonate, was designed to, quote, explode on impact. One of the rally organisers, Fabian Yarran, called it, quote, a hate crime against First Nations people and protesters, and said it must be fully investigated as an act of terrorism. Police, however, have not labelled it as terrorism. They've said they're treating it as a potential terror act. We'll explain what you need to know in today's podcast and the fallout that has ensued.
Okay, so Billi, I think that we should first run through what actually happened on Monday, at least what we know to have happened, and then go into what you just said about the terrorism label, because I know that's attracted a lot of online discourse. But just starting from the beginning, what actually happened?
Yeah, so on Monday, it was, of course, the date of Australia's national holiday, officially called Australia Day, but it's often called Invasion Day by many First Nations people and allies. And in Perth, there was an Invasion Day rally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at this specific rally in Perth, police say about 2,500 people were in attendance. So there was a lot of people there. And they alleged that just after midday, a man removed an item from his bag and he threw it into the crowd of protesters before fleeing the scene. That item, police say, was a bomb, also known as an improvised explosive device, which is mostly what the police have been calling it, but it is the same thing as a bomb. And like I said before, it did not detonate, so no one was harmed.
But there has been quite a lot of CCTV footage that, we've been able to watch that incident really unfold.
Yeah, and you can literally see him throw it into the crowd and then flee.
Run. Yeah.
What we know happened after that happened is that a member of the public alerted the police, and the police then dispersed the crowd and isolated the bomb, and then they were able to investigate it and see exactly what it was. The man who, like I said, he fled the scene, he was identified by police and he went into police custody. And since then, he has been charged with 2 offences. So he has been charged with making or possessing explosives under suspicious circumstances, as well as an unlawful act with intent to harm.
So this man has been charged with 2 separate offences there. We know that he was denied bail as well. You keep referring to him as the man or the alleged offender. What do we know about him beyond, say, what we saw on that CCTV footage?
Honestly, we don't know a lot at all because we, as in the media, are not able to identify him in any way.
Talk me through that. So you're referring there to a suppression order.
Yes.
We, the media, are obliged to follow this suppression order. Why is it in place? I mean, I think that for people that don't work in media, it's a very foreign concept. We've explained it before on the podcast. That was for a very different incident. Why is it in place now for this?
Yeah, so I asked WA Courts this, and in terms of why, just going back a step to explain what a suppression order is. So the media is not able to publish the name, address, image, or any other particular which would enable the identification of the accused in these matters. So we can't say anything about him.
So it's not even that we can't say his name, it's that we can't give enough information that a reasonable person would be able to deduce who that person was.
Exactly, and the Daily Aus could be taken to court or get into a lot of legal trouble if we did that in any way.
Yeah.
So that's why we can't identify him in any way. In terms of why, we don't have a clear answer for that. When I followed up and tried to understand more, I was told that the process would take about a week for that information to be revealed, just because of how the court system works. So we don't have an answer for that right now, but I'm sure it will come out eventually in the coming weeks.
So we don't know, or we can't identify who this person is. And secondary to that, we don't have a reason that's been made public, at least, about why this suppression order is in place.
Hi there, my name's Emma. I'm the editor at the Daily Aus, just popping in to say hi and let you know that here at the Daily Aus, we are an independent media company who work to break down the news for young Aussies in a digestible and accessible way. If you like what you're watching and you like what we do, please hit the subscribe button. Now back to the video.
Exactly. And just to explain that a little bit more, what that means is that the Daily Aus, as a media company, if we were to provide any identifying details, we could get into a lot of legal trouble. So that's why not just us, but any media publication, they cannot provide any identifying details. In terms of why in the past suppression orders are granted, it could be if the courts believe that identifying the person could impact their right to a fair trial, or if they think that the safety of the person is at risk. Those are just some of the reasons why suppression orders can be granted, but we don't know the exact reason in this case.
So there's just so much about this that we don't know or that we can't report on. We can't report on the person's name or identity, but also the reason why this suppression order exists in the first place. So there are definitely a lot of question marks around what unfolded on Monday. I want to take a step back now and just talk through what the response has been to this. Obviously, it was a First Nations rally where this took place. What have we heard from the First Nations community?
Yeah, I would say the First Nations community have obviously been very deeply distressed by this incident, and not just by what has happened, but also what could have happened. You know, this could have been a mass casualty event.
Yeah, I heard the same from police, which is obviously extremely concerning and distressing.
Yes. So Casey Tierman, who is the Indigenous rights campaigner at Amnesty International Australia, she put out a statement where she said, "This rally was attended by thousands, including elders, children and babies. It is a miracle the device didn't explode. This was a deliberate attack on First Nations people designed to cause maximum harm and fear. It comes amid rising racist and hate-fueled attacks." I also have seen some criticism directed at the response from officials on the day and also in the days after. So one of the rally organisers, Fabian Yarran, he said, quote, "There was a significant lack of communication from WA police when the device was discovered, which led to confusion and unnecessary concern. At no point was there clear, timely or transparent communication with rally organisers." Yarran also said that this incident needs to be, quote, "fully investigated as an act of terrorism," and also called for the Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion, which was recently announced by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, to be immediately expanded to include all forms of racism and far-right extremism. Fabian Yarran said, "What we are seeing is not an isolated issue. These threats impact many communities, and any serious inquiry must reflect that reality."
Talk to me about what goes into this sort of designation.
Well, I'll repeat what Western Australia's Police Commissioner Cole Blanche said when he was asked exactly why this hasn't yet been declared a terrorist act. So he said, "To be an act of terrorism, it requires one of three things: either political motivation, a religious motivation, or some type of ideology and advancing that cause." He continued, "So at this stage, it's a hostile act, and we are investigating whether or not those motivations existed to prove terrorism charges." So that's what we know about
the criteria almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was said on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, WA Police, the AFP and ASIO put out a joint statement where they said that they are investigating it as a potential terrorist act. So there could be an announcement on that at any moment if they do decide to declare it a terrorist act. If that does happen, that would mean that the alleged perpetrator could face terrorism charges, which would obviously increase his maximum jail sentence if he is found guilty.
Yeah, because I was going to say that he's only been charged with these two crimes at the moment, and so that would obviously increase in the event that this was declared a terrorist attack, as we saw, say, in the aftermath of the Bondi attack. Billi, thank you for explaining that, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The Daily Aus. If this has brought up anything for any First Nations listeners, you can contact 13 Yarn at any point. We'll be back again later today with the afternoon headlines, but until then, take care of yourself.